The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Ski Sundown in nearby New Hartford, Connecticut. Open 7 days and nights a week with a variety of terrain for skiers and snowboarders of all abilities. Hours at skisundown.com. Winter made better. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy. Admissions now open for graduate programs in 2025. Learn how to become a changemaker at umass.edu/SPP.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we manifest our maple destinies as the season is officially open and head west to check out what the trees and more are bringing to Ioka Valley Farm in Hancock with owner Missy Lieb.
And Ben Crockett from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures joins us there to talk more about the conjunction of forestry and farming.
But first, small bones seeking to be picked.
And questions about who gets to go to space and how.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Time for some more kitchen table astronomy with Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hamid, and we're going to talk about some interesting new endeavors into space. But before we do that, Mr. Universe, we're going to put on your other hat, your Amherst cinema hat.
Even before we do that, Monty, I see that you brought some dino socks.
Yes, we've given all of our regular guests a classic public radio swag as a thank you. So Khalees made cookies for you, as did my son Pax.
Love those.
Yeah, and we got you a mug that has a scenic design from the 413 on it, and then the NEPM socks with Holyokensis podecasaurus, the official dinosaur of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Maybe we'll be doing one of the interviews, me, just in those socks.
I think the video version of it would be, people would watch that. Yeah, so your contributions to public radio here on this show have been honored by these things that we give to people who help support public radio, and we need you now. Back to your other role, Mr. Universe, as a board member for Amherst Cinema. The Oscars were last night. Honora, the big winner, the director of Amherst Cinema, Yasmin Chin Eisenhower, reached out to Khalees and I last year and said, you guys got to come to this screening of Honora. It's my favorite movie of the year. And lo and behold, big winner last night.
Absolutely. And it was my favorite movie as well. We have talked about it before. It's a small film, as the director said. It was made for $6 million. Sean Baker, the director, he also won for Best Directing Oscar, and there were total 5 Academy Awards that it won. And if you haven't seen this director's earlier films, like for example, The Florida Project or Tangerine and others, do see those. Again, those are small films, but with a lot of heart. Yeah. And I also loved Honora. I do have to say one thing, because there is a lot of hype about it, a lot of buzz about it, and people go with very high expectations of a particular type of movie. I think this is the type of film which is great on the big screen. Mm-hmm. When you are immersed in it and you don't pause or you don't say, I'm going to watch half of it today and half of it tomorrow. You have to be in it because there are lots of ups and downs in it, and you have to experience those when you are watching it in one go. And so I think, because I've had discussions about that, and people go like, oh, I thought Honora was amazing, but when I was watching it on TV, it's just no, That's the whole thing. And the Sean Baker, the director, actually made perfect pitch for watching films on big screen and also for independent cinema.
And making films for the big screen, to encourage directors and writers to make movies for the corporate experience of being together in a theater and watching it together.
But with just the appropriate caution, there is a lot of sex and nudity in the film.
Yeah, they did thank sex workers, everybody, 201 who won an award. So that tells you something about what the movie is about. But if that's not troublesome to you, it is a wonderful, fun ride. We have a little ballot game that we play when we watch the Oscars. I went over to my friend Bob Kraskowski's house, who's the director and writer of the Sam Elliott movie, The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot, and it's got some other big movies in the works right now. He correctly guessed 7 of the 23 Oscars. I correctly guessed 12 of the 23 Oscars. And my 17-year-old son, Enzo, who is going to go to college for film school, got 17 of the 23. He just creamed us.
He always does, doesn't he?
He does. I don't know. I'm going to take him to Vegas.
I think that would work. But I should add one other thing. While we talk about Honora and we talk about other things, one of the wins for Honora for the Best Actress, even though Mackie Madison was amazing, but I still think that Demi Moore for The Substance, which was also an excellent film. I think that would...
And in a low-budget film, too. Another not huge Hollywood
That's right.
film, an indie film. I was a little sad for Demi Moore, but she won all the other awards, so I feel good for her, too.
And the best documentary feature.
Yes.
No Other Land, which is about West Bank, and it is made by a Palestinian and an Israeli filmmaker that won for the best documentary feature. That is excellent. But I should also mention that that particular film, even though it has won many awards, it still does not have a distributor in the US. And I think that is just crazy. Even though it does not have a distributor in the US, it is still being screened in different places, including in Western Mass. It is playing at Amherst Cinema, and it is also playing as part of the Multicultural Film Festival at UMass Amherst. So if you do get a chance, I mean, it's a tough film, but I love their speeches as well, because it was about the fact that this is the type of thing that people from all sides have to come together to speak what is going on in terms of the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians.
There is a different path, a political solution without ethnic supremacy, with national rights for both of our people. And I have to say, as I am here, the foreign policy in this country is helping to block this path.
I think it's an important film. It's a really crucial film, and I'm so glad that it was recognized at the Oscars.
All right. We'll put your Amherst Cinema hat away for the moment and take your Hampshire College Kynott Studios hat and put it on, and we're going to talk about some interesting missions to outer space.
Right now, as we speak, there is a private mission to the moon that actually just landed. It's the Blue Ghost lander by Firefly Aerospace. This is a Texas-based...
The Space Ghost lander?
The Blue Ghost.
Okay.
The Blue Ghost lander. Space Ghost, that would be cool.
I love
actually.
Space Ghost. Space Ghost Coast to Coast, one of the greatest shows of all time.
Greetings, I'm Space Ghost.
And we will talk more about that because this is not the only one. And the amazing thing about this one, just add, that this is the first attempt by this particular group. There are a lot of these private spacecrafts now going to the moon, taking NASA payloads, for example, and also other private companies, their experiments and things like that. This is their first attempt, and it has been successful, which is rare. And if I remember correctly, I think only China's missions are the only ones that have actually successfully done on the first go. But we will talk more because there is another one, Intuitive Machines, that is expected to make a landing on the moon, I think, this coming Thursday.
Okay.
So we can actually put it together. But what I want to talk about today is a complicated question regarding space as inspiration. The reason I'm putting it as complicated will become clear in a minute. But there are two stories that came out a couple of days ago. One was that China, our Chinese Space Agency, is going to train astronauts from Pakistan to actually take them to the Chinese space station. And I think
That's where you're from.
not from the space station.
Not from China either, but from Pakistan.
Right, so that I think is really cool. And in fact, this is for space powers taking people from countries that do not have the same capabilities, and this is also a little bit like from the global south perspective. This is an agreement on the selection and training of Pakistani astronauts and their participation in Chinese space station missions. It is expected to happen in a year or so. So they're going to select, there's going to be a selection process. After that, an astronaut from Pakistan is going to go to the space station, and of course, no Pakistani has been to space. And I think that's a great opportunity to create inspiration. And I think this is the type of things that in the 60s, for example, the Apollo program, I mean, it was a different context because, of course, the US was doing that stuff. China is right now doing it. Nevertheless, if you see somebody that looks like you, that talks like you, that is from your culture, trained and then going to the space station, going to space, there is a buzz that gets created around it. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity for a country like Pakistan, for example, to really build structures around it. This is a great opportunity to have science museums, a planetaria, to have STEM programs, to say, look, hey, what happens in space? And yes, people can go to space. Even though Pakistan is not the one who's launching it, nevertheless, this is a great opportunity. But I also fear, within that thing, because there is also the negative side of nationalism that comes in. And of course, with Pakistan, it's always its competition with India. India is also sending its astronauts through NASA, by the way, they are being trained. And India has its own space program. They are also planning its own space station. I actually don't think Pakistan and India are anywhere close to the same playing field. I mean, India is way ahead. Nevertheless, I mean, I think that would be a huge loss if for Pakistan it becomes more like, hey, we are going to space before you. But no, China is just taking you up there. But it can still offer a lot of inspiration. So when I was thinking about these things of how going to space, even though the astronauts are not going to go on their own, like rocket from Pakistan, it will be going from Chinese rockets. That space station is Chinese. Nevertheless, there is a process of training. There is a process of being involved in experiments, for example, scientific experiments in the Chinese space station. So there are a lot of things that actually come in there and which I can imagine being serve as inspiration for kids. But alongside with that, I heard the news that Jeff Bezos' Blue Origins, for example, he has a rocket, a New Shepard, and that is going to take an all-woman crew. So 6 women that are going to go to space. So that was interesting. And again, the framing of it. So this is the same kind of flight that they did a few years ago where Jeff Bezos himself went, but also William Shatner, for example. And famously, William Shatner came back, not immediately, but certainly later on, he thought that it was a dark experience for him because it really gave him the perspective about what is happening on Earth.
Right.
So you never know how that's going to go. But to me, this was a tricky thing because it was billed as the first all-woman crew. And so certainly can be an inspiration. But this is also done by a billionaire who's just saying, hey, here is a rocket. And all these people are going to be just in there. They're not flying it. They're not doing anything. I mean, I'm not sure how to look at it because it's not a crew, it's passengers because it's an 11-minute. So they go up to about 100 kilometers, which is considered by definition sort of like, space. And they're going to go in for 11 minutes and then come back. And the people that are going there are also influential and rich. So, for example, pop singer Katy Perry.
She's one of the ones going up?
She's one of the ones going up. Gayle King, the host of the morning show on CBS. And certainly those are things that are going to give a huge amount of publicity to Blue Origins. Then Lauren Sanchez, she's the fiancée of Jeff Bezos. And then there's a film producer. There is a former NASA engineer. And there is an entrepreneur from Vietnam also going. And so I'm very conflicted about it, how to think about it. It's not exactly a crew because they don't do anything. It's all programmed. There is a really nice article in The Guardian by Sarah Manavis, and the article is titled, Jeff Bezos takes one small step for feminism and social progress and one giant leap for self-publicity. So again, inspiration for what, right? I mean, this is the type of thing that in the same week, he directed that the opinion section of a newspaper, one of the major newspapers, institutional newspapers, Washington Post, that it will not have dissent in it and it's going to just have particular viewpoint about liberty and free markets.
Right.
Where his editor resigned from it and he was given that option that either you follow that directive or you go.
Yeah.
So here is a billionaire, and we already have another billionaire who also wants to go to space, who is dismantling the federal government.
And DEI, which is strange, given that Jeff Bezos is now doing something that would probably fall under the category of DEI with an all-female space trip.
But that's the thing, right? I mean, but ultimately, he's framing it that way, and it brings him back into the news in a different way.
Right.
SpaceX is ahead in terms of compared to Blue Origins. But this is all for tourism. This is all for his company.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether Gayle King, for example, is paying her trip or whether she's on the trip because there's going to be a 2-hour live coverage of it when she goes up there. And that's free publicity that you are getting on CBS. Mm-hmm. And she has been criticized by somebody from Washington Post because they said like, hey, instead of banding together that this is the same guy who is gutting Washington Post.
Right.
And then you are writing on it. So it's a complex question. I can also imagine sort of like, that, I mean, it is great for inspiration for women to see, girls, to see that. But to me, there are a lot of things that are problematic about this type of mission, which gives this tremendous power to the billionaires. That's how SpaceX, that's how Elon Musk has made its way, and that's how he can cut these things because, NASA is being cut right now. Jeff Bezos is the one, somebody who is controlling the newspapers from the media perspective, and then he does that. So I think we have to figure out how to think about these things and whether this inspiration that I mentioned, how to balance it out. Ultimately, it is about Jeff Bezos's power, it is about Jeff Bezos' publicity, and it is about his business of astrotourism.
If you're looking for some real inspiration that comes from people who have worked with NASA and have been publicly funded and aren't billionaires and are leading the programs, we've got our own astronaut, Katie Coleman, of course, in Shelburne Falls, who reached out to me to remind me and you, the listener, that on March 9th, which is this Sunday, C.N. Proctor is an astronaut who flew 3 days in space on the Inspiration 4 flight and is speaking at the Springfield Symphony. So there are inspirational folks, even locally, to look to if going to outer space is your dream.
Absolutely. And that, I think, is the genuine one, right? Space has always been sort of fascination for me, that humans should go to space, I should go to space and all of that stuff. But when I see these type of news items, there is a reaction that happens, and how do we contextualize it? The inspiration becomes cheap. Inspiration becomes in the service of capitalism. Not just capitalism, but exploitative capitalism, because Jeff Bezos is the one who's been against the unions as well. His practices in Amazon are not there. Elon Musk with Tesla, the kind of treatment of workers over there, and now the treatment of all federal workers. They use this narrative of inspiration for their own exploitative gains.
And going back to where we started, Jeff Bezos is also probably going to ruin one of the greatest movie franchises of all time, as he's now bought James Bond.
And he himself would be in it, I'm assuming.
He'd make a great supervillain. He's got the bald head and everything. Hashtag not all bald men.
Did you include that just for you?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. We don't mind. Now we just go on this side of the New York border to see the maple making, helping, and serving operations and more at Ioka Valley Farm with owner Missy Lieb and Ben Crockett of Berkshire Agricultural Ventures.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, homegrown in Hatfield, Massachusetts, and providing energy savings for their customers for over 10 years. Learn more at northeast-solar.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family business with experienced craftsmen offering skylights, siding, gutters, and doors. windowworldofwesternma.com.
We do a lot of coverage of farms on the east side of the Berkshires, but we've crossed the mountains. And
It's about time!
It's about time, and it's perfect because it's our first maple episode of the 2025 maple season, and we're at Ioka Valley Farm in Hancock, Massachusetts. What's your name?
Missy Lieb,
You're the owner here?
one of, yes, the family.
And we're also here with...
Ben Crockett.
Any relation to Davey?
Probably very distant.
Okay.
Killed him a bar when he was only 3. Davy.
But is also the climate specialist for Berkshire Agricultural Ventures. What's your official title?
The Climate Smart Agricultural Program Manager.
Does it have an acronym?
No. We say CSAP sometimes, but...
CSAP!
Well, it's perfect for a maple.
maple season.
Yeah, CSAP. Can we CSAP?
Today, yes, SAP is actually running today. We started on Tuesday with some SAP flow. So we are beginning the first agricultural awakening in the state of Massachusetts has begun.
It really...
This is the first time in our 2 years of doing the show that the maple has been running in the time that the state has actually said it's supposed to be running.
If you talk to farmers who've been doing this for a long time, they'd be tapping all the way into April. Now there are farmers who are having to tap as early as MLK Day in some instances. How long has your family been involved with this, Missy?
So we started making maple syrup in 1992
Okay.
with 13
So
taps.
10 years ago.
A little more than 10. But yeah, with just 13 taps with buckets around the yard was the first year.
And so you started in February, which is the normal-ish time, end of February, to be tapping trees. Ben, what have other farms in the Berkshires been saying about maple season so far? Has it been what we like to think of as normal pre whatever type of climatological disaster we're barreling towards?
I think this year is a little closer to normal, is my understanding, but it's hard to tell year to year, and that's what really makes it challenging is the lack of reliability. There's more variability year to year, so it can be hard to tell when to tap, when to get things out there, when to get the boiler ready. That just adds a different level of complexity to planning the whole farm operation.
How do you know it's time to tap?
Watching the weather patterns. We did start tapping early January just because of the number of taps we have to put out and be ready, and our goal is to be all tapped before the first sap run. So we had been tapped and actually finished and had a couple weeks in between before the sap actually started to run this year. Whereas last year we had already boiled. January 29th was our first boil last year. So we were looking at patterns. This brings us back to a more traditional by calendar tapping zone that we haven't seen in the last couple of years.
The ratio, if I'm correct, is somewhere between 40 gallons of sap to 1 gallon of maple syrup usually. Do you have any special fun processes like reverse osmosis that gets the water out or anything like that to make it a more efficient way to make the maple syrup?
Yes, so we do use reverse osmosis, so we'll bring our sap, which is between 1 and 2% sugar content, all the way up to 18% sugar content before we boil. Huge energy savings. The electricity needed to run the RO is still so much less than it would be for wood or oil to boil the sap from a raw state. And it's also a time saver because now it's less time to boil.
I know that there's no guarantee necessarily for how much sap you'll get this season, but how much sap ran last season?
So we ended up with what we call still an average yield. It was just a very long season. It took from that January 29th all the way to April 15th to have a full crop and a full season for us. Some sugar makers in Massachusetts ended during our warm spell, which was right around that St. Patty's Day weekend. So a lot of Massachusetts ended early and had a slightly smaller, maybe 75 to 80% crop of what they would consider normal.
Do you generally go into April?
We go till the buds break on the maple trees, and that tends to be related to sunlight and daylight time as well as the actual temperatures that are going on, so the combination. So anywhere from that first week of April to a little bit beyond is where we can make it. We tend to be a little colder, we're a higher elevation, we're north facing, so all those things that we stretch out a little bit later than some. Eastern part of the state starts earlier, ends earlier.
Everything has to do with terroir. We're in Hancock at Ioka Valley Farm. What is Ioka Valley?
Ioka is a Native American word for beautiful. So when my husband's grandparents came here in 1936, they chose the name for the farm.
That's great.
Yeah, that's nice. Is that really the name of this valley, or is it really just the name of the farm?
The name of the farm, it's the Taconic Valley.
Okay, because I wondered if Taconic and Ioka were maybe like etymologically related, but not necessarily?
No. So the Taconic Crest Trail goes right up the backside of our property here. So we're right along the Taconic Crest Trail.
Right, and we're right near Jiminy Peak, who's giving advice to Pinocchio.
That's just the trouble with the world today.
Are you my conscience?
Who, me?
How many taps are we talking that you have here at Ioka Farm?
So this year we're at 15,700 taps, which is slightly less than our usual. We have one section that's been removed for renovations, so the tubing's been taken out. We need to renovate, prepare it, and then put the tubing back in. But yeah, so we're working off just over 15,000 taps this year.
Oh, so you're doing gravity tubing, like the vacuum tubing too?
Yes, not buckets.
I don't think anybody with 15,000 taps could really be doing buckets in this day and age.
Not in this day and age, but I've heard of some that did a lot of buckets in their day, so that's not impossible. Massachusetts has probably over 300 maple producers statewide. We go all the way east, and this is the western edge because we abut New York. So the belt for Massachusetts is the true hill towns, tends to be where most of the maple producers consolidate, more woodlands, more tradition in that area. Maple production does go as far south as West Virginia. We're watching patterns. They obviously have a much earlier season and started boiling already, but they still make excellent syrup.
As you get into Connecticut and further down, the variability, it gets harder to tap maples, and then just the species that grow there aren't as competitive in those woodlands. So the maple line, as it were, is moving north, or will be moving north given climate models right now. So you need the freezing and the thawing cycle to actually move the sap through the tree. So that creates a limitation on how far south you can go.
For the most part, climate-wise, I think in agriculture in general, technology has been huge at helping us navigate the challenges of a different climate where you can't always go by calendar to do things anymore. You have to actually go by the actual weather patterns that are going on. So in the past, sugar makers would have never even thought about tapping trees in January because nobody ever paid attention to the January thaw that we might have had, that could be a time to tap, because they wanted the bulk of the production, which is usually March for Massachusetts. So you waited until it was more typical weather, that pattern of freezing and thawing going on, catching from that first thaw till bud break. Knowing with your traditional tap and bucket, where the air gets into that, those tap holes will heal up sooner, between 6 and 8 weeks, where with the vacuum and the technology with a clean system, you can keep your tap holes open for 12 or more weeks now, and therefore you can extend your season and capture more sap flows in some of those earlier thaws that we never even thought about trying for.
I've been reading a bit about how people are thinking through the evolution of their sugar bush changing from being a sugar or rock maple to including more red maple, because red maple can be a little bit more weather resistant. Are you seeing that at all? Have you heard much about that?
So our forest is naturally diverse. We probably are closer to 60% soft maples and only 40% hard maples, and that's been right from our get-go. And right now we're doing the ash tree removal for the emerald ash borer, so we are doing that in our forest management plan. So we're doing all of that, but we're leaving the young ash. They appear to be healthy. So the whole forest complex. But yeah, soft maples, typically we're always told they are a little less sweet. So it takes more sap out of those to produce a gallon of syrup. But with the reverse osmosis, that's not much of an issue because we put it through the RO first, and then we're still boiling from an 18% standpoint. A side note is out in the state of Oregon and Washington, they are now tapping the big leaf maple. And you talk about taste difference, a totally different flavor profile, but they are starting to do that and investigating and finding it, whether it would be a good ingredient or whether people would actually get accustomed to it for toppings.
First they came for our apples, and now they're coming for our maple?
Well, it's just changing the playing field entirely. Like, taste-wise, same thing with the apples. It's just like, it's not that it's better, it's just different.
Luckily, we have the 51st state of Canada to provide us all the real maple that we need.
But one of the coolest things about maple season is the machinery, after all, and we'll get a chance to see the evaporators and reverse osmosis machines and other ways science is helping the sugaring season with Missy Lieb and Ben Crockett at Ioka Valley Farm.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. We are at Ioka Valley Farm in Hancock with Missy Lieb and with Ben Crockett from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures. It appears we're in your retail space right now, where you're selling beef and other things, and a ton of maple products and the classic maple jugs, and then in some of the beautiful glass maple leaf style bottles.
Where does the beef come from?
Where's the beef?
Yes.
Where's the beef?
The beef is in this cooler.
Yeah, in the barn. Besides maple production, we're diversified, so we also raise Black Angus beef. So we have about 40 to 60 head of beef cattle here at the farm that we raise and finish off here. So it is our own beef. It actually comes from my sister-in-law's farm. They have the cow-calf operation right over in Stephentown, New York. So small family. We have a small herd that we work together with, and we take an opportunity to enjoy some good meat.
Can we take a tour of your maple barn, or
Yes.
show us around?
We are in our, what we call our porch, and this little porch of the sugar house is not only a gift area, but a place that will offer tastings and samples of our products on the weekends when we're open, and we can head on into the sugar house itself.
Yay!
We'll kind of start from the beginning. The sap comes down in from the sugar bush into this releaser right here. You can see the sap that's coming down from the hillside. So this particular releaser collects the sap from about 10,000 taps. And you can hear it now. It's dumping into the storage tanks. We have two 9,000 gallon storage tanks in the back. Well, the goal is when you make maple syrup, you would like to have a gallon of storage for each tap you put out. So that way you have time to collect and not necessarily boil immediately, but still promptly. So we try to...
You don't have to be boiling 24 hours a day to keep up with everything.
Yes, we have a little bit of sleep room if we can. That works most of the time. And the next room, so before we boil. So through the windows here, you can see there's two machines in here. Those are our reverse osmosis machines. And I like to describe them as We're backwards from the water bottling companies because most of the water companies will use a reverse osmosis to purify their water. While maple producers, they keep the sugars that are held back and not go through. So we have two separate tanks. One tank will hold the pure water in the back, and then the concentrated sap will go in the tank right here by the evaporators. So that'll be about 18% sugar when it comes out. We'll use the water from the RO to come back through and wash and rinse, and also wash and rinse our evaporators because it's very similar to distilled water. It helps pull the minerals off the stainless steel evaporators for cleaning. So
Very cool.
So when we're ready to boil, we have the main workhorse here is our evaporator. It's a 5x16 oil-fired evaporator.
It looks like a magical train.
He's the cheeky one.
It's like a steam engine version, but there's hoods on top of it, again, to preheat the sap, and an energy efficiency savings, a way to capture the evaporation process, where our little 2x6 evaporator has no hoods on it, so you're able to really see how the evaporator works. The back.
And that one looks like the little engine that could.
I think I can. I think I can. I think I can.
And that is a wood-fired. So the back pan of an evaporator is called a flue pan. It's not a flat bottom pan. It has curves and convexes to increase the surface area that the sap actually can connect to the heat to do a quick boil and fast evaporation. So the little 2x6, just as an example, can boil off 50 gallons of water of evaporation an hour. So with the raw sap, it would make about 1 gallon of maple syrup. But if you concentrate it, we did an example here at 15% sugar, we would make 8 gallons an hour. So you can see the energy efficiency just even on the small scale, where over on the larger evaporator, we go from 60 gallons of finished syrup an hour to over 100 gallons of syrup an hour just by using the reverse osmosis.
Yes, science.
Yes, science!
The energy part is you're capturing the heat coming from the evaporation to preheat the sap before it gets boiled.
So everything's being circulated from the water that's been distilled out to the heat.
Contained system.
Yeah. Put a sauna in here and it'd be perfect.
It becomes a sauna in here. It smells like maple and it's a sauna and warm in the winter months.
Not the most efficient, but it's delightful.
Exactly.
It seems like you have a lot of educational stuff in here too. Do people that come on the weekends come and learn about the process? Like you have, I see Mrs. Butterworth over here and Aunt Jemima and a couple of the other classic stuff that, if you grew up in the suburbs and not near farms, you might have been having.
Yeah, so we'd like to have that display just to compare. Maple syrup is just sap from a maple tree, just boiled down, as simple as that, where the others have about 10 different ingredients in there just to mimic the flavor. We also have a display up here to test your knowledge on tree bark, because of course this time of year when you're tapping trees, there's no leaves on the tree, so you need to really be good at tree identification to make sure you're tapping the maple trees.
That's cool.
I like that you didn't put, there's no label on the obvious one.
Birch. You're supposed to know that one.
That card might be missing, but it wasn't.
No, leave it off. It should be the obvious.
We'll give you one easy one.
And then our little tree display that's on the back wall just demonstrates the visual effect of 40 gallons to equal 1 gallon for maple syrup.
You also got a lot of blue ribbons over here. Where are those from?
Those are from contests we've entered over the years with our maple products. So we've won some first and second places for our maple cream, our maple sugar, and even our maple syrup.
What makes for the great maple syrup?
Color and flavor. So here's a little grading kit. There are color and then, of course, flavor profiles that match the color. So the key is to actually have the flavor match the color like to a T. So the golden is the lightest in color, the sweetest in flavor with a very delicate maple flavor. This is what we use to make the maple candies, the maple cream, that really sweet maple. As the season progresses, Mother Nature naturally darkens the color, gives you a little more maple flavor each step of the way, and gradually less sweet. So amber is a rich flavor, middle of the road, nice balance of maple and sweetness, tends to be the most popular for toppings, the pancakes. The general public tends to navigate.
The platonic ideal of maple syrup.
But then the dark robust is again a bolder, more robust maple flavor, not quite as sweet as the previous, still sweet enough for pancakes, but especially good if you bake and cook. It brings that maple flavor through your recipe. It'll compete with your barbecue sauces, your mustards, and your other recipe ingredients like sausage and stuff like that. And then it'll continue to get darker and darker, so there's a very dark, very strong grade. That tends to be more of a commercially type flavor, very, very bold. It starts to lose some of that sweetness, and it is true just flavor. And then once the buds break on the trees, it becomes a very bitter flavor, and we call it buddy.
Hey, buddy.
What up, buddy? What up,
buddy? We price all the grades the same. At one time, people used to prize the golden and would be more expensive for the golden, but we feel it's equal efforts to make good product all the way through, and we want people to buy the flavor they like, not buy the price.
I like the formerly grade B.
Yeah, that's what I was
All
going to
maple,
ask.
little sugar.
Yes.
Do you know why and when they started making the A robust as opposed to the B grade? Like when the shift in classification started?
My guess is 2015 it might have been official, but right in that area, Canada and the United States got together and wanted to make common ground and common terms for everyone.
Remember those days?
Yes. So, for example, Vermont was using fancy to describe the golden. New York already had a very dark term that no one else was using. So it was to put everybody, so when you as a consumer went to buy syrup, you could buy the same or similar product from sugar maker to sugar maker, and you wouldn't be getting something that you weren't expecting.
I wish we called it fancy again. Kind of like that.
I think Vermont really wanted to hold on to fancy. I believe they were like a sticking point in the negotiations. Yeah.
There's no
Can
way.
we just have it fancy?
There's no way you're not putting Iggy Azalea in there right there,
right.
aren't you?
I'm so fancy. You already know.
You can keep the ketchup fancy, but that's it. Why is ketchup fancy? I've never understood this. Ketchup is like the least fancy.
And then the room we just walked into is what we call our canning room. So when we make maple syrup, we're making a fair amount of volume at once. So we do put them in 40-gallon barrels, hot packed right then and there. And then as we need to fill our retail shelves with the smaller containers, we'll pump them out and put them into the canner.
Love it. And you've got the custom-made Ioka Valley containers here. Are these ones made in Turner's Falls, these containers,
Yes,
do you know?
They are.
Almost all of your plastic Massachusetts maple syrup containers come from Turner's Falls.
Most of them. It's a Sugar Hill container, they call, and it's at the LTM in Turner's Falls.
Sugar Hill Gang.
Yeah.
I said a hip, hop, the hip.
I think something that intrigued me about Ioka is that you're a supplier to other maple producers.
So the other half of this room is a storefront for people to buy their own supplies to make their own syrup. So if you wanted to buy some buckets and spouts and make your own, we have some here.
I'm only used to seeing buckets and not kegs to get your sap around. So this is fascinating.
Any more to see?
Why, yes, there is. More of our tour from Ioka Valley Farm with Missy Lieb and Ben Crockett when we get a glimpse of their cafe, their seasonal hay tunnel, and some of the cutest cattle around.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Ski Sundown in nearby New Hartford, Connecticut, offering group, private, or semi-private lessons for all ages and ability levels. Options and details available at skisundown.com. Winter made better.
Following Missy Lieb out of the maple barn, there's these giant silos here, and we're going into the Cafe, C-A-L-F-A.
We'll be doing pancakes on the weekends now until April 6th in conjunction with the making of maple syrup, so we can have the sugar house tours and tastings and pancakes as well. You mentioned the silos. Originally, we were a dairy farm, started back in 1936. The barn we're walking into was built in 1971, and we are walking into the old calf barn. Well, this was the calf barn section when we were milking. The kitchen was our milking parlor where we actually milked the cows. And in 1997, when the dairy cows left, we renovated this whole front section of the barn so we could have the restaurant and kitchen area. So this is where we'll make all our specialty products as well out here in the kitchen. So the maple syrup is made in the sugar house. All the other products are made out here.
Can you go visit the cows through the door?
Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, so they are right here.
They are right here.
Because I was like, I smell cows.
I know, that was like, I smell cows. Oh, I see a light. I bet there's
I
cows.
was like, wouldn't it be weird if the smell of cows has been here for such a long time? Oh, there's a cat. And a beehive. This place is awesome. What is going on?
So this is a display in here that shows what our woods looks like here. This is a little tubing display. So it shows the taps in the trees with their drop lines and the tubing connecting so people can actually get a visual on what is going on in our woods. And then we also have a history of our farm right here on the back wall, starting from our dairy time. 1989, we started pumpkins, Christmas trees. We started planting those in 1984, but we didn't start selling them until 1994. Maple started in 92. And then our summertime petting and play area, which you can see some of the toy things around us, that started also in the summer of 97 to replace the dairy cows. We needed something to do during the summer. So that's an educational petting and play area time where families with young children can come and meet farm animals and explore.
Agro-tourism.
Including the hay tunnel.
Is that an operational hay tunnel, or is that just stowed away?
We have it blocked off for this time because we're not out here.
I'm so excited to go in the hay tunnel. Tony Dunn, our director, you get your Christmas tree here?
We don't get our Christmas tree here, but we come in the fall. My daughter Ryan adores the hay tunnel and adores the petting zoo, and we've gotten pumpkins here, and it's just a glorious place to come and hang out with the family in fall or spring or anytime.
I hear chickens or something.
So on the weekends, we do have it where a few animals can be seen. Today we have the chickens, but in these other two pens are alpacas, and a couple of goats will come up to the front and be able to visit with people while we're here. And then again, the cows have the back end of the barn all to themselves.
Ladies, your eggs are so valuable right now.
And in our chickens, we have one guinea hen. She decided she didn't want to
Italian.
You get to make that joke.
Yes, I do.
The gray one.
She's
in the
without
front.
papers.
yeah.
Well, she'll pick on the other ones actually, but
Of course.
You broke my heart. You broke my heart.
I have a question for Ben Crockett, actually.
Ben Crockett from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures.
So trees as the agricultural product, how does tree-based agriculture fit into what you're seeing working with Bav?
The thing to keep in mind for where we are in the country is that if you leave ground alone, trees will grow. That's kind of like a natural default. That's not to say that there isn't a need for forestry management, but we're in a climate that can grow trees pretty well. There's an impetus for growing more trees, although we have, historically we're way more forested than we were back in the sheep days. And you can go back to a lot of maps looking at, I think it was something like 20% of Massachusetts was left forest. Vermont was a little bit less, and we've really bounced back over the last 100, 150 years from that. But the species are changing, and then on the agricultural side, I think there's a lot of opportunities. So I know you all were out last fall with some of us at Jono's place at Big River Chestnuts, and I think that's a good demonstration of other crops that are seeing the light of day in a way, like kind of seeing a resurgence or seeing an opportunity in our climate. And then I think, what Missy does here and the family does here at Ioka, that's, I think, that forestry side of it. And, what kind of in the industry we call non-timber forestry products are definitely seeing more attention. And this can go from maple syrup to mushroom production. There are certain herbals and medicinals that only grow in the woods. Like ginseng is definitely something that I've heard more farmers talking about. So I think there's a climate opportunity in the sense if projections are accurate. Like, I think trees present some resiliency that annual crops might be more susceptible to, especially because if you lose an annual crop in July or August from a flood, for instance, right, you can't replant. That's like a lost season. And then when we're talking about farms diversifying and having different enterprises to kind of weather the literal and figurative storms, forestry or tree crops are a good way to kind of balance that out.
It's also a way to fight climate change actively with more trees.
Perennial plants, especially trees, sequester more carbon.
You have two forestry products, basically, that you're working with, Christmas trees and maple. How different is it stewarding each of those crops?
So we have a forest plan for the sugar bush that we implement, and that's extremely long-term because that's looking ahead. The trees, before we even tap them, are 40 years old already, so we're looking at mature stands. Christmas trees is still a timely investment because you plant them in 8 to 10 years, you begin to sell them. It's a totally different approach because you are planting a monoculture, so it's more like a cornfield, but all year round cornfield. So your management practices for that are different, and the challenges for that are different because monocultures are normally not deemed as an easy, healthy choice where diversified is. So cover crops and interplantings and how many times can you plant in one spot before you move your field, all of those come into play with the Christmas trees. We are going to be moving our cut your own section because we've interplanted for many years and it's time to move it. So we are looking at trying to use the land in the best possible ways and plan for the future, especially now that we have the fourth generation here. And my daughter says we are continuing with Christmas trees.
I think the only other point, a finer point I'll put on this is the real trick, and it's great to see multiple generation farms, is just farmers that don't have access to good land tenure, trees are not a good option because you can't take them with you.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of years to really see the benefit of trees, more like on the scale of 10 to 20 years instead of annually or even within a few seasons like a berry. Trees are great, but you have to have that land tenure and someone taking care of the trees there. And that can be a tricky part of the equation.
Yeah. Sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees.
Oh, God.
I'll leave it with you.
We went so long.
Here are the cows! Oh, sorry, I scared them. I got so excited that I scared them away.
You said it's all Angus?
Yeah, so some are Hereford Cross, but primarily Angus. One section has the older cows, and these
are Angus young.
Yeah, Angus young, yes. They'll go outside as soon as it's green enough grass to get out there to graze and not dangerous and icy like it is right now.
Yeah. How many of them do you have in here right now, you think?
Probably close to 50.
Hey, cow.
That's a high end.
Am I salty? I'm getting licked by a cow.
Herefords and Anguses are just like, they're shaggy and adorable.
We are moving into the fourth generation joining us, so I am married into the third generation. My husband was raised and born here in the farmhouse here. My father-in-law, as a little side note, was also physically born here, literally.
In the barn?
No, in the house. He might have been. I should
Almost.
ask him. But yes, he literally was born here at the farm, and he has not moved anywhere else. He has only lived here. He is going to be turning 84 this July. So we are happy to have him be our patriarch here. My children, Josh, who's 26, my daughter Martha, who's 22, are officially joining the farm business as business partners this year with us. So we're very excited to have the fourth generation invested and interested.
Which is really important. The age of most farmers in Massachusetts is retirement age, so it's always exciting to see that there's other generations and folks willing to jump into this very tough business to carry it on.
Yes, and they seem to complement each other well. They're still brother and sister, but their interests seem to complement each other. What one doesn't like to do, the other one does. They do fight over who gets to make the pumpkin whoopie pies and things like that, because there's some tasks that everybody likes to do.
See, if that just requires the Thunderdome. They each make theirs, and then you have a weekend where like all your customers get to vote for which one they want. The public speaks.
I like that.
Whether we like
volunteering.
it or I volunteer as tribute.
I volunteer as tribute.
That's a pretty tough one to do, the whoopie pies. They both follow Grammy's recipe very well.
I'm curious, have you been doing all of the transition planning internally, or have you gotten any support from other folks outside of the farm?
Yeah, so lots of help. Of course, Farm Credit East is helping with some of the business planning piece. We are enrolled in the MDAR program, the succession planning, so they are also helping us with some goal setting.
I was going to pick on you to see if you wanted to say anything about Farm Bureau.
Oh, Massachusetts Farm Bureau. Well, I am
I know
currently
I know
the
you
treasurer.
host some of it.
I am the treasurer for the Massachusetts Berkshire County Farm Bureau. My in-laws have been very, very, very active and devoted to the county farm bureau for many years, so it was time for us to become active as well. We'll be hosting the legislative breakfast here at the farm coming up here in March.
What is the Farm Bureau's chief responsibility?
So they're our legislative voice. Mm-hmm. So I can definitely speak on, there was a proposed candy tax in the governor's bill, and we as maple producers are asking for that to be looked at very seriously, because some of the products we make would be deemed as candy, and we felt that in agriculture it was kind of hard to accept a tax that's coming from an agricultural product. So we did want to get clarification and express our concerns on how this might impact farmers who are making their own products and going to farmers markets with their products. Mm-hmm. We have someone hired in the Massachusetts Farm Bureau office that is down at the state office working and watching what's coming in for articles and other rules that may affect farming. So they're actively there standing up for our voices and letting us know as things come down, because the fuel tax was one that had also been recent. Yeah. And so there'll be a group of us maple producers as well as other farmers going down to the Ag Day at the State House. Also, that's going to be March 18th. We'll be able to go down and meet with our legislatures personally, and our Berkshire County group puts together a van to bring people down to Ag Day so our voices can be heard face to face.
Missy Lee, thank you for giving us a tour of your wonderful Ioka Valley farm here in Hancock.
Thank you. I'm glad you guys made it out for the beginning of sugar season.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Ben Crockett from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, thank you for adventuring with us.
Thank you guys as always. Good to see you.
Won't you drop on by the sugar shack?
Local heroes Boxcar Lilies with a song about sugaring. We're going to talk more about maple sugaring a little bit later in the week on the side of the mountains that we're on right now.
Yes.
In Belchertown.
Yes.
We'll take you to a maple farm that's been doing it for 50 years.
And who's about to have a giant celebration about it, too, which is wicked cool.
It is wicked cool.
Yeah. I wonder if there's like an interactive maple map with all the sugar houses so that you can, like, you know, much like Pokemon, try to get all of them.
Catch them all.
Well, because like not everybody does the same products, and not everybody, like every tree is a little bit different. We were talking about terroir.
Yeah.
So it'd be cool to try and like hit as many as you could in the 6 to 8 weeks of maple season.
Well, I bet if anybody has that interactive map, it's CISA, and they will be the ones who we talk to the next Sugar Shack with a little bit later in the week.
Indeed, and learn more about that party because parties are cool.
Yes.
On the next Fabulous 413, we're going to visit a new exhibit with New York Times bestselling author Mo Willems at our Michelson Galleries. Mo has an annual exhibit that raises money for a good cause, usually local cause. We'll get a preview with the man himself and find out what subject he's deciding to put in his work this year.
Yeah, it's not the pigeon and elephant and piggy that he does at this thing.
No.
It's always something a little bit more abstract. And I do know that it is not a local cause that he's supporting this year, but a cause that many people care very deeply about.
Oh, hey.
And we'll find out more about that on tomorrow's
Yes.
show.
And it won't involve numbers like the last one. I don't remember the very first one.
Yeah, he's been doing it for a long time.
I know.
Tomorrow on the show, we'll also hear from the executive director at Images Cinema about their campaign to raise funds for a new screen. They are a single screen right now in Williamstown, but they want to double their screen size, and there is a campaign afoot at the moment.
We'll hear about that and a little bit about the Oscars with him,
tiny
too.
bit, yes.
Tiny bit. Yeah. Everybody had ideas. And we'll also learn about an innovative dance production happening at Berkshire Community College this Thursday with the Justice Dance Performance Project, taking the lived experience of those incarcerated, putting it up on their feet and in people's bodies for us all to engage with. Should be pretty fascinating.
Yeah, perhaps if you watched the Oscar-nominated movie Sing Sing, tomorrow's conversation will be right up your alley. Coleman Domingo should have been considered more thoroughly for that Best Actor Oscar. I did hear, though, that he led a dance party during a commercial break from the stage at the Oscars. So that was fun to watch behind the scenes. I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Klee Smith. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.